When I picked up the phone to ask my son Max about the date of his wedding, my daughter-in-law Lena looked me squarely in the eye and said with a cold, almost cruel smile, "Oh, we got married yesterday. We only invited special people." Her words hit me like a bucket of ice water. Special people. Me, who for 3 years had paid their $500 rent every month, bought every piece of furniture for their home, and stocked their refrigerator when they had nothing to eat. I wasn't a special person. I stood in my own living room, the phone feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my hand, watching my son avoid my eyes while Lena made herself at home on the sofa I had bought for them. The pale pink dress I had carefully chosen for her wedding now hung uselessly in my closet, along with the new shoes and the dream of being part of the most important day of my only son's life. I had spent $200 on that dress, imagining how lovely I would look in Max's wedding photos in which I would never appear. For weeks, I had meticulously planned every detail. I had set aside $1,000 as a wedding gift. I had called my sister Diana in Chicago to share the happy news. I had cleaned my house from top to bottom, thinking they might come celebrate there after the ceremony. All of that crumbled in a single moment, destroyed by those 4 poisoned words. Only special people. Finally, Max lifted his gaze and said in a rehearsed, unnatural tone, "Mom, it was an intimate thing, very small, just the 2 of us and the witnesses." But I knew it was a lie. I had seen the photos online. Lena's parents beaming next to the bride and groom, her siblings toasting with champagne, that I saw Lena's white wedding dress, the very one I had helped finance with the $800 I had given her last month for personal expenses. I saw everything I wasn't meant to see. A week later, exactly 7 days after that crushing humiliation, Lena called, but her voice was completely different. Gone was the confident woman who had deliberately excluded me from her wedding. Now she sounded desperate, almost pleading. "Renata, the rent is overdue. The landlord is pressuring us and says, if we don't pay this week he will kick us out. You forgot to make the transfer." Her voice quivered, as if the world were collapsing around her. I stayed silent for a few seconds, thinking of all the times I had rushed to the bank to make that transfer. All the times I had canceled my own plans to make sure they had a roof over their heads. All the times I had eaten beans and rice just to give them money for their wants. And now, after being excluded from the most important moment of their lives, they had the audacity to call me as if nothing had happened. "Lena," said, my voice calm even I didn't expect. "Didn't I warn you that I only help special people?" The silence on the other end of the line was so deep I could hear my own heartbeat. For the first time in years, it wasn't me who was trembling, it was her. "Renata, I don't understand," she stammered. "We were always special to you. You're like a second mom to me." Lies. All lies. Wrapped in that sweet, manipulative voice she only used when she wanted something. The same voice she had used to ask for money for the wedding dress, the honeymoon, the rings, things I had helped pay for, never knowing I would never witness the ceremony where they were exchanged. For so many years, I had felt as if I were walking on eggshells, measuring every word, every gesture, every gift, hoping for even the tiniest crumb of affection from my own son. I had been the perfect mother, the obliging mother-in-law, the silent. I had been the provider who never protested when they treated me as if I were invisible. But that phrase, "only special people," awakened something in me that had lain dormant for far too long. I calculated in my head how much money I had spent on them over those 3 years. Rent, food, gifts, emergencies, whims. It totaled over $20,000. $20,000 I had taken from my retirement, from my savings, from the money my late husband had left me to live my last years in peace. And for what? To be treated like a stranger on my own son's wedding day. That night, after I hung up the phone, I sat on my bed and cried. But these were not tears of sadness. They were tears of anger, of accumulated frustration, of years of silently endured humiliation. I cried for every time they made me feel that my love was a burden, my presence a hindrance, my money the only thing I had to offer. I cried for the foolish mother I had been, the woman who had lost herself trying to be indispensable to those who considered her dispensable. When I woke the next morning, something inside me had shifted. It was no longer just the pain of betrayal. It was something colder, sharper, more resolute. I stood before the bathroom mirror. The same tired eyes. The same wrinkles telling stories of decades of love given without return. But in that reflection, there was something else, a hardness I did not recognize, a determination. Buried beneath years of compliance. I went to the kitchen and made coffee, as I had done every morning for 40 years. But this time, I did not think about calling Max to ask how he had slept. I did not check my phone, waiting for a message of apology for yesterday's humiliation. Something inside me had changed, and I knew I would never be the same again. For the first time in years, I was my own priority. I sat at the table where I had so often planned surprises for them, counted bills for their expenses, and silently cried when they treated me with indifference. Today, this table would witness something completely different. I pulled out my checkbook, bank statements, and began calculating, wanting to see in precise numbers the extent of my own foolishness. Monthly rent of $500 for 36 months, $18,000. Food and supplies roughly $200 per month, $7,200. Birthday, Christmas, and anniversary gifts, at least $3,000. Lena's medical emergencies, $800. The car loan they never repaid, $2,500. Air conditioner repairs in their apartment, $600. Living room furniture, $1,200. $33,400. That was the exact sum of my generosity. $33,400 taken from my husband's inheritance, my pension, my lifetime of savings painstakingly built through decades of honest work. All that money thrown away to keep two adults comfortable, who couldn't even pretend to respect me. The phone rang. Max's name appeared on the screen. Normally, my heart would have raced as I hurried to answer, hoping he would finally apologize or explain that it had all been a misunderstanding. But this time I let it ring, once, twice, 3 times, until it went silent. I continued sipping my coffee unbothered. 10 minutes later, it rang again. Lena. I let it ring too. Then a text arrived from Max. Mom, please answer. We need to talk. I deleted it without a second thought. At 2 p.m., I decided to go for a walk. Not for them. Not for errands or obligations. Not to the bank for a transfer. Not to the supermarket to buy something they needed. Not to the pharmacy for Lena's medications. Today, I walked just for myself. I passed the park where I had often taken Max as a child. I remembered that sweet boy who hugged me tight and whispered, "You're the best mom in the world." When had he become this man who saw me as nothing more than an ATM with feelings? When had I started confusing love with money? When had I believed I had to purchase my son's affection? I stopped in front of the bank where I had so often made automatic transfers. Through the glass, the branch manager, Mr. Clean, waved at me. I had known him for years that he had processed every single one of my transfers to Max and Lena. Month after month he had watched my account slowly drain to fill theirs. I walked into the bank and went straight to his office. "Mr. Klein," I said calmly, "I need to cancel all the automatic transfers I have set up." He looked at me with surprise. For 3 years, those transfers had been as constant as the sunrise. "Are you sure, Mrs. Richter? Did something happen?" His concern was genuine, more genuine than anything Max had shown me in months. "What happened," I replied, "is that I finally opened my eyes. I want everything canceled. And I want to know how to protect my accounts. I don't want anyone else to have access to my money." As Mr. Klein began processing the cancellations, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Max, Lena. Max again. It was as if they had developed some sixth sense to detect the moment their financial lifeline was being cut. I turned the phone off completely. "Mrs. Richter," Mr. Klein said gently, handing me the papers. "I apologize if I'm overstepping, but I've watched you be very generous with your family over the years. I hope no one is forcing you into this decision." His words touched me more deeply than I expected. This man, who knew me only through bank transactions, showed more genuine concern for my well-being than my own son ever had. "I'm not being pressured, Mr. Klein. I said with quiet strength. On the contrary, I finally stopped pressuring myself. When I walked out of the bank, I felt strangely light, as if I had left behind a massive weight in that office. For the first time in years, my money was truly mine. I no longer owed a single cent to people who saw me as a resource, not a person. On my way home, I thought about all the things I'd sacrificed to keep Max and Lena comfortable, the trips I hadn't taken, the friends I had drifted away from because I was always on call for their emergencies, the hobbies I'd abandoned because every dollar spent on myself was a dollar less for their needs. When I turned the corner to my house, I saw 3 cars parked in front of my door, Max's, Lena's, and one I didn't recognize. My chest tightened. I saw movement through the windows. They had keys. I had given them keys because I trusted them, because I believed that one day they would take care of me the way I had always taken care of them. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and reached for the doorknob. It was time for the first real confrontation of my new life that I opened the door to my house and walked into a scene I will never forget. Max was sitting on my sofa, his head buried in his hands. Lena was pacing back and forth like a caged animal, and an older man I didn't recognize was standing at my dining table, going through papers, my personal documents. What is happening here? I demanded, my voice louder and steadier than I expected. All 3 of them turned toward me with the same expression, like I was the intruder in my own home. Lena spoke first, her voice trembling with the same desperate urgency I had heard on the phone. Renata, thank God you're here. We need to talk. Mr. Fisher is from the law firm we consulted about your situation. My situation? The words left my mouth slowly, wrapped in a calm that even surprised me. What situation? I'm doing perfectly fine. Max finally lifted his head. His eyes, once soft and innocent when he was a little boy, were now filled with something colder, tighter. Panic. Mom, he began. We went to the bank. They told us you canceled all the transfers. Mr. Klein also said you blocked our access to your accounts. We don't understand why you would do that. The man in the gray suit stepped forward. He was in his 50s. His smile carefully practiced, the kind of smile that tries to disarm but only breeds mistrust. Mrs. Richter, he said, extending his hand. I'm Dr. Fisher, a family law attorney. Your children are concerned about your mental well-being and have asked me to assess the situation. I didn't take his hand. Instead, I walked straight to the dining table and gathered every single document he had been rifling through without my permission. These are my private papers, I said firmly. You have no right to look at them without my consent. Mom, Max interjected with that condescending tone he had perfected over the years. We're worried about you. Your behavior has been strange lately. First, you cut us off financially without explaining why. Then, you ignore our calls. We think maybe you need professional help. Lena stepped closer, her face softened into the same fake tenderness she always used when she wanted something. She reached for my hand. Renata, sweetheart, she cooed. We know you're under a lot of stress. Maybe the loneliness is getting to you more than you realize. At your age, episodes of confusion are normal. Confusion. The word echoed in my mind like a siren. In that instant, everything became clear. This wasn't about concern. It wasn't about love or worry. They hadn't brought a lawyer to help me. They had brought a lawyer to take everything from me, to declare me mentally incompetent, to seize control of my finances. The same woman who had once told me they only invited special people to their wedding was now looking at me like I was some senile old woman who couldn't tell day from night. I am not confused, I said, my voice firm and unwavering. The room fell silent. I am clearer than I've been in years. And you are going to leave my house. Right now. Mr. Fisher stepped forward, speaking in that smooth, professional tone lawyers use when they want to sound reasonable but are really just trying to control the situation. Mrs. Richter, I understand this may feel overwhelming, he said. But your children have the legal right to intervene if they believe your ability to make financial decisions is impaired. They've documented several concerning behaviors. Concerning behaviors? The laugh that came from my throat was hoarse, sharp, almost cruel. Like what? I snapped. Deciding that my money belongs to me? Choosing to stop financing the lives of two adults who treat me like trash. Lena flinched as if I had struck her. We never treated you badly, she protested. You're part of our family. Everything you have will belong to us one day anyway. We're just speeding up the process. There it was. The truth stripped bare. In their minds, I wasn't a mother or a person. I was an inheritance, still breathing, still convenient, but already theirs. Whether I had 70 years or 70 days left didn't matter. To them, I was just an ATM with legs that had suddenly become inconvenient. Out, I said, pointing to the door. All three of you. Get out of my house. Max stood up, his face twisted into the petulant expression he used to make when he didn't get his way as a child. Mom, we can't just leave, he said angrily. We have obligations. The rent, the car payments, the credit card you co-signed for. You can't just cut us off from one day to the next. I can't. My voice rose for the first time in the entire conversation. Who says I can't? For years, I've paid rent that wasn't even in my name. I filled the refrigerator in a house where I wasn't welcome. I financed a life that clearly had no room for me. Mr. Fisher calmly took a folder from his briefcase and placed it on my table like a vulture setting down a meal. Mrs. Richter, we've prepared some documents that could facilitate this transition, he said smoothly. A power of attorney that would allow Max and Lena to manage your finances more efficiently. This would just be temporary, until you feel better. I picked up the folder. I didn't bother opening it. I walked straight to the trash can and threw it in. The only transition happening here, I said coldly, is yours to the front door. Lena burst into tears, but they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of frustration, of rage barely held together. You can't do this to us, Renata, she cried. We were counting on you. We made plans based on your support. We bought things. We took on financial obligations because we knew we could. Count on you. Obligations, I repeated slowly, based on my money. Not my happiness. Not my well-being. Not my company. Just my money. And now that I've decided my money will finally be used for me, I've suddenly become a confused old woman who needs legal guardianship. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time, they weren't looking at their lifeline. They were looking at someone they could no longer control. Max moved toward me, but I stepped back. He was no longer the frightened boy who had run into my arms after a nightmare. He was a 35-year-old man who now saw his mother as an obstacle between himself and a comfortable life paid for by others. Mom, we made mistakes, he said, attempting remorse. The wedding was a misunderstanding. Lena was nervous. I was under pressure. We can fix this if you just become reasonable again. Reasonable? The word tasted bitter. To be reasonable, in their terms, meant continuing to bankroll their lives while pretending it didn't sting to be erased from the most important day of my only son's life. It meant swallowing humiliation for the price of being useful. Mr. Fisher began folding his papers with the efficient calm of a man used to rejected proposals. Mrs. Richter, he said, this is not over. Your family has legal options. If you are making irrational decisions due to mental health problems, a judge could appoint a guardian. His words landed like a blow. This was no ordinary family confrontation. It was a legal ambush, an attempt to declare me incompetent and seize control of my affairs. Mr. Fisher, I replied, looking him squarely in the eye, I suggest you do your homework before threatening a 71-year-old woman who has managed her finances for 40 years, raised her son alone after her husband's death, worked honestly until retirement, and until last week supported two perfectly capable adults. Lena dried her tears and stared at me, the mask slipping to reveal the person beneath. This won't stay like this, Renata, she said coldly. We have rights and lawyers too. Fine, I said. Hire every lawyer you want. Using your own money, of course. Mine is no longer available to finance your legal tantrums. They left with the wounded dignity of people unused to being refused. Before the door closed, Max turned back once more. This is going to end very badly for you, he warned. You'll be alone with no one to take care of you when you need it. Max, I answered, with sadness and a clarity that surprised me. I am already alone. Only now it is by my choice, not by your neglect. When the door clicked shut, the house filled with the most beautiful sound I had heard in years, silence. It was the silence of freedom. That night I could not sleep. Not from sorrow, but from adrenaline. I lay awake, planning like a general preparing for battle. If they wanted a fight, I would give them a war, but one fought. With strategy, not with raw emotion. By 6 the next morning I was dressed and ready. My first stop was the office of Mr. Weber, the attorney I had met years earlier while handling my husband's will. Unlike the man Max and Lena had brought, Mr. Weber had an impeccable reputation and specialized in protecting the rights of the elderly. Mrs. Richter, he said after I explained everything, what your children tried to do yesterday is more common than you think. It's called elder financial abuse, and it's a federal crime, Mr. Weber said, his voice steady and reassuring. The fact that they entered your home without permission and reviewed your private documents also constitutes a violation. His words brought a mix of relief and concern. Relief because they confirmed I wasn't imagining things, that what had happened was real, abusive and wrong. Concern, because the situation was far more serious than I had realized. We need to document everything. He continued. Every transfer, every gift, every instance they pressured you for money. We'll also update your will to protect your assets from any future manipulation attempts. We spent 3 hours going through my financial records. Mr. Weber whistled when he saw the total. $33,400 over 3 years. Mrs. Richter, he said, shaking his head. With this money you could have lived comfortably, traveled, and truly enjoyed your retirement. Instead, you completely financed the lives of 2 adults who didn't even have the decency to include you in their wedding. By the time I left Mr. Weber's office, I had a clear, actionable plan. First, I would change all the locks on my house. Second, I would install a full security system with cameras to protect myself from any more unexpected intrusions. Third, I would open a new bank account at a different bank, completely out of their reach. And fourth, I would begin living the life I had postponed for decades. My next stop was the hardware store. The owner, Mr. Summer, knew me well. For years, I had been buying tools and supplies to fix up Max and Lena's apartment. Today, however, the purpose was very different. Mrs. Richter, what brings you here today? Another emergency with your son? He asked, his voice tinged with the familiarity of someone who had quietly witnessed my generosity being taken for granted. No, Mr. Summer, I said firmly. This time it's for my own house. I need to change all the locks, and I want the best quality locks available. He looked at me with surprise but didn't ask a single question. While I examined the different lock options, his son Ethan, who specialized in installing security systems, walked into the store. It felt like fate had aligned itself with my new beginning. Ethan, I said, turning to him without hesitation, I also need to install surveillance cameras, a complete system. Price isn't an issue. Within minutes, they were setting everything up for the installation the very next day. For the first time in years, I felt like I was the one taking control of my own life. Then my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but the voice on the other end wasn't Lena. She had found another way to reach me after I'd blocked her number following yesterday's confrontation. Renata, it's Lena. Please don't hang up. We need to talk like civilized adults. Speak, I replied, my voice flat and cold. Listen, I understand you're upset about the wedding, she began, layering her tone with practiced sweetness. It was a mistake. Max and I talked about it, and we want to make it up to you. How about a special dinner to celebrate our wedding with you? We could do it at your house, cook together like we used to. The manipulation in her voice was so transparent that I almost laughed. Lena, I interrupted. How much rent do you owe me? The silence on the line was louder than any excuse she could have given. Well, it's 2 months. $1,000 total, she finally said. But I'm not just calling for that, Renata. We really miss you in our lives. Do you miss me? I asked, or my money? Both, she answered, surprisingly honest. I won't lie to you. Yes, we need your financial help. But we love you too. You're important to us. If I'm so important, I said quietly, why wasn't I important enough to be at your wedding? Why haven't I ever received a call from you that didn't involve asking for money? When was the last time you called just to ask how I was doing? More silence. Because we both knew the answer. Never. Lena, I said finally, I'll explain this only once. For 3 years, you've treated me like an ATM with feelings. You used me. You ignored me. And now that ends. You humiliated me, I said, my voice low but steady. And finally, you insulted me in the worst possible way. Now that the money is running out, you suddenly discover you love me? Renata, please. I cut her off sharply. There is no please. You made your choice the day you decided I wasn't special enough to be at your wedding. Now, I'm making mine. I hung up before she could say another word and turned my phone off completely. No more interruptions on the first day of my freedom. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I went to the beauty salon. I used to cancel every appointment because Max or Lena always had some sudden emergency. Somehow, the money I set aside for myself always ended up becoming theirs. Mrs. Richter, Cynthia, my favorite stylist, called out the moment I walked in. What a surprise. I thought you'd forgotten us. I didn't forget you, Cynthia, I replied with a small smile. I just forgot that I also deserve to be pampered. And that's exactly what I did. A haircut, fresh color, a manicure and pedicure. The works. For the first time in years, I spent money on myself without the familiar knot of guilt tightening in my chest. As Cynthia worked on my hair, she talked about her life, her children, her dreams. It was so refreshing to have a conversation that didn't revolve around Max and Lena's endless needs. When she was finished, she stepped back, beaming. You look beautiful, Mrs. Richter. But more than that, you look free. Did something good happen? Yes, Cynthia, I said, looking at my reflection in the mirror. I finally learned to say no. When I got home, there was a car parked in front of my house that I didn't recognize. My heart skipped a beat, thinking Max and Lena might have returned with reinforcements. But as I got closer, I saw an older woman sitting quietly on my porch steps. Mrs. Richter? She asked gently as I got out of the car. Yes, I replied. That's me. Can I help you? I'm Eleanor Brooks. I live next door. We've been neighbors for years, but we've never really spoken. Yesterday, I heard some very loud voices coming from your house, and I got worried. Is everything okay? Her sincere concern touched me in a way I hadn't expected. A neighbor, a near stranger, showed more care for me than my own son. Come in, Mrs. Brooks, I said softly. I'll make you a coffee, and I'll tell you a story you won't believe. In the warm light of my kitchen, over 2 steaming cups of coffee, I told her everything. From the years of quiet sacrifices to yesterday's ugly confrontation. She listened silently, nodding occasionally, her kind eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, Eleanor's eyes glistened with tears. Mrs. Richter, she said finally, reaching for my hand. You did the right thing. I went through something similar with my daughter 5 years ago, Eleanor said softly. I also believed it was my duty to finance her adult life. I also thought they wouldn't love me if I didn't give them money. What happened? I asked. I cut them off, she said simply. At first, it was terrible. They threatened me, emotionally blackmailed me, tried to make me feel guilty. But after 6 months, my daughter called me, truly apologized. Now we have a real relationship, based on love, not money. Her words gave me hope. They confirmed that I had made the right decision. Do you think Max and Lena will understand one day? I asked. Maybe yes, maybe no, she admitted honestly. But that's no longer your responsibility, Mrs. Richter. Your responsibility now is to live your own life. That night, for the first time in 3 years, I went to bed without worrying about whether Max and Lena had money for rent, for food, or for their whims. I went to sleep thinking about myself, my plans, my future, and I slept better than I had in years. The next morning at 8 a.m., Ethan and Mr. Summer arrived to change the locks and install the security system. My phone didn't stop ringing, unknown numbers, different numbers, Lena's desperate attempts to reach me. But I had learned a new skill: ignoring calls that didn't serve me. Mrs. Richter, Ethan said as he adjusted the cameras, this system will give you complete peace of mind. You can see who's at your house from your phone, even when you're away. And if someone enters without permission, the police are alerted automatically. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was installing a security system to protect myself from my own son, but it didn't sting anymore. It was simply a practical step to safeguard my newfound peace. While they worked, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years: call my sister Diana in Chicago. Over time, our conversations had become financial reports disguised as family news, detailing Max and Lena's successes and my contributions. I realized I had lost the personal connection. Renata, Diana answered, surprised. Sister, how are you? We haven't spoken in months. I'm good, Diana. Better than good, I said, a small smile spreading across my face. I'm calling to tell you that I've finally come to my senses. I told her everything, from the secret wedding and the humiliation, to the lawyer's visit and my decision to cut off all financial support. Diana listened silently, her presence on the line steady and comforting. For the first time in years, I felt truly heard. And when I finally finished talking, her answer stunned me. Renata, sister, it was about time, Diana said softly. Every time we spoke, it broke my heart to hear you brag about how much money you gave them, as if love could be measured in dollars. I wanted to tell you the truth, but I didn't know how. My chest tightened. What truth? That Max never spoke about you. With love, she confessed. At family gatherings, it was always my mom paid for this. My mom helped with that, but never I miss my mom or I love my mom. It was as if you were a service provider, not a person. Her words pierced me like glass, but it was a necessary pain, like a doctor cleaning a wound. It hurts, but healing demands it. You know what else I noticed? Diana went on. Lena always spoke of you in the future tense. When Renata is no longer here, we'll remodel her house. When we inherit, we'll invest in the business. As if your death was simply the starting line for their dreams. The revelation struck me like a bucket of ice water. They didn't just see me as a bank. They saw me as an obstacle between them and the life they truly wanted. While I was sacrificing everything to make them happy, they were planning a future without me in it. After that conversation, I sat alone in my kitchen, letting the truth settle into the quiet. 35 years of raising my son alone after my husband's death. Years of hard work. And 3 long years of financing 2 adults who saw me as a $100,000 inconvenience. Then the doorbell rang. Through the new security cameras, I saw Eleanor standing outside with a steaming mug in her hands. I opened the door, and she greeted me with that gentle, sincere smile I'd grown to trust. I thought you might need some company after everything you told me yesterday, she said, handing me the coffee. We sat in the living room, and she began sharing her own story. My daughter used to say the same things Lena tells you. You're like a second mom. We're special to you. Everything will be ours one day anyway. Those aren't words of love, Renata. They're rehearsed lines. Straight from the Emotional Manipulation Handbook. I let out a half-hearted laugh. Do you think such a handbook actually exists? Not officially, she smirked. But they all seem to read from the same script. Chapter 1. Make her feel indispensable. Chapter 2. Create constant financial emergencies. Chapter 3. When she resists, question her mental health. We both laughed then. The kind of bitter laugh that sits between humor and heartbreak. Did you ever feel guilty, I asked softly, for cutting off the money? Every single day for the first 3 months. Eleanor admitted without hesitation. Every day I felt guilty. Like I had abandoned her. Like I wasn't a good mother anymore. But then, she smiled faintly, the kind of smile that comes from hard-won strength. I started to see the results. My daughter had to get a second job. Her husband stopped playing golf every weekend and started picking up extra shifts. They learned to live within their means. And more importantly, they learned that I was a person, not a resource. Those words lingered in the air long after she left. That afternoon, I finally decided to do something I had been postponing for years. Visit Robert's grave. I had always found excuses. Max needed this, Lena needed that, or the taxi fare would be better spent on one of their emergencies. But this time, I went for me. The cemetery was quiet, wrapped in a kind of gentle autumn stillness. Robert's grave looked neglected. I hadn't been there in months. I sat down on the grass beside his headstone, placed my hand on the cool stone, and spoke as if he were sitting right next to me. "Robert, my love, I think I lost myself for a while," I whispered. "After you died, I poured everything into Max. I wanted to be the perfect mother, to make up for what he lost. But somewhere along the way, I forgot who I was." A soft wind passed over me, and for a brief, fragile moment, it felt like he was listening. "Our son has become someone I don't recognize," I continued. "Or maybe he was always like this, and I just didn't want to see it. And Lena, well, you'd see right through her charm. Wouldn't you? The money you left me so I could live in peace. I spent it trying to keep them happy. But not anymore, Robert. Not anymore." I cleared away the dry leaves, replaced the withered flowers with fresh ones, and stayed there in silence. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to clean up someone else's mess. I was simply there. When I finally pulled up to my house, my heart lurched. 3 cars were parked in front. Max, Lena, and 2 strangers. All of them standing on my front lawn, voices raised, arms waving. The old me would have felt panic. But this new version of me was prepared. I stayed in the car and checked the cameras. Max looked furious. Lena was crying again. But this time, those tears didn't pierce me. They slid off like rain on stone. I called Mr. Weber. "They're here again," I said steadily. "And they've brought more people." "Stay in the car, Mrs. Richter," he instructed. "I'm on my way." I also filed for a temporary restraining order after our last talk. "They're legally not allowed to be on your property. I'll call the police." Within minutes, 2 patrol cars and Mr. Weber's sedan pulled up. The officers spoke with Max and Lena, their flashlights sweeping the scene. Max gesticulated wildly. Lena cried harder. Then one officer approached my car. "Ma'am, you can get out safely now. Your visitors will be leaving immediately." I stepped out, calm and upright, as if years of fear had finally drained out of me. Max shouted from the street, his voice shaking with anger. "Mom, this is ridiculous. We're your family. You can't call the police on your own son." I looked straight at him, and my voice was steady as stone. "Family," I said slowly, "doesn't threaten lawsuits for mental incompetence." The silence that followed was louder than his shouting. "Family doesn't break into people's homes without permission," I said clearly, my voice slicing through the night air. "Family doesn't treat their mothers like ATMs." Lena's face twisted with rage. "You're going to pay us everything you owe us," she screamed from across the street. "We have bills you co-signed for. You can't just abandon us like this." Before I could even respond, Mr. Weber stepped forward, his tone calm but unyielding. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, deliberately using her formal name, "any future communication must go through my office. And I strongly suggest you consult an attorney before making collection threats. My client has complete documentation of every voluntary payment she made over the last 3 years. You have no legal claim here." The way he spoke, calm, firm, professional, was like watching a shield form around me. Max and Lena exchanged a look. Anger, frustration, defiance, but also fear. They got into their cars and drove away, slower than they should have, like people retreating but not surrendering. And I knew this wasn't over. But for the first time, that thought didn't scare me. I had a lawyer. I had Eleanor. And most importantly, I had finally found myself again. That night, Eleanor invited me over for dinner. Her house was warm and softly lit, filled with the comforting hum of normal life. Her daughter was visiting, and I watched the two of them interact. Nothing grand, nothing forced, just kindness. They listened to each other. They laughed together. Her daughter didn't ask for money once. Not a hint of obligation, only respect. I wanted that with Max too, I admitted quietly when her daughter left. Eleanor squeezed my hand gently. And maybe one day you'll have it, she said. But first, he needs to learn that you are a person who deserves respect, not a walking wallet. That night, when I climbed into bed, it wasn't guilt that filled the room. It was something far more precious: hope. The following days were strangely quiet. Almost too quiet. Through the surveillance cameras, I saw Max and Lena driving past my house several times a day. Sometimes they slowed down. Sometimes they parked for a few minutes. Never stepping out. Just watching. Like predators circling a fence, waiting for weakness. But I didn't break. I logged every visit carefully, date, time, duration, just as Mr. Weber advised. Their persistence will work in our favor. He told me. Every time they show up after being warned not to, it strengthens your case for a permanent restraining order. Friday morning came softly, sunlight spilling across the kitchen table as I enjoyed my coffee in rare, uninterrupted silence. Then the doorbell rang. I checked the camera. A young woman stood on my porch, impeccably dressed, hair pulled back neatly, a folder tucked under her arm like a weapon of bureaucracy. Her professional smile didn't reach her eyes. I opened the door cautiously. "Good morning, Mrs. Renata Richter," she said smoothly. "My name is Emily Vargas. I'm a social investigator with the Office of Senior Services. We've received a report, and I'd like to ask you a few questions." My blood ran cold. "We have received a report that you may be in an at-risk situation, and we need to conduct a wellness check." My blood turned to ice. Max and Lena had escalated this. It wasn't just legal threats anymore. Now they'd dragged the government into it. "May I see your ID?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Of course." She held up an official badge, real, legitimate. "I'm Mrs. Schmidt, a social worker. May I come in and talk to you?" I opened the door. I knew that refusing would only make me look worse. She stepped into my living room with quiet authority and sat down as if she'd done this 1,000 times. From her folder, she pulled out a printed form, the kind that decided fates in neat little checkboxes. "Mrs. Richter," she began, reading with careful neutrality, "we've received reports that you've shown significant changes in your financial behavior, that you've cut off communication with your family, and that you've displayed signs of paranoia by installing unnecessary security systems. We were also told that you've refused medical and legal assistance offered by your loved ones." Every word was like a knife wrapped in silk. I didn't just hear the accusations. I heard Lena's voice inside them. She had always known how to make poison sound like concern. "Mrs. Schmidt," I said, sitting a little straighter, "I would like to call my lawyer before answering any questions." "Ma'am, this isn't a legal interrogation," she replied smoothly. "It's a wellness check. If you have nothing to hide, it shouldn't be a problem to speak with me." That sentence, "if you have nothing to hide," made my blood boil. I'd heard that exact phrase before, from people who thought they had the right to invade my life. Abusers loved using innocence as an excuse to violate boundaries. I met her eyes steadily. "I'm calling my lawyer. You can wait here or come back another day, but I will not answer a single question without legal representation present." I dialed Mr. Weber's number with a steady hand. He arrived in less than 20 minutes, briefcase in hand, expression carved from stone. When he entered the room and saw Mrs. Schmidt, his voice went cold. "Mrs. Schmidt," he said after inspecting her credentials, "I sincerely hope you have a court order to be here. My client is under legal representation, and any unauthorized investigation will be considered harassment." Her confidence faltered. "Sir, we received reports from concerned family members about the lady's well-being. It's our duty to investigate." "What family?" Mr. Weber's voice was sharp as a blade. "The same family that attempted to pressure her into signing over power of attorney without representation?" Silence. Mrs. Schmidt shifted uncomfortably in her chair. For the first time, she looked uncertain. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. I wasn't the vulnerable one here. They were. The same family that had broken into her house without permission and rifled through her private documents. The same family that had excluded her from life's milestones while living off her money. Mr. Weber set a folder on the table, his voice steady and precise. Here, I have complete documentation of my client's financial and emotional abuse. $33,400 withdrawn from her accounts over 3 years, systematic social exclusion, and repeated emotional manipulation. If anyone needs investigation, it is not my client. Mrs. Schmidt's eyes flicked over the pages, growing increasingly uneasy. It was clear the reality before her did not match the report she had received. Mrs. Richter, she finally said, can you explain why you abruptly stopped financial support for your son? Because I finally discovered they were using me, I replied simply. Because I realized that to them, I wasn't a mother. I was a bank account. I was tired of financing the lives of people who saw me as an obstacle. But don't you feel it's your responsibility to help your family? She pressed. I felt my temper rise. Miss Schmidt, my responsibility as a mother was to raise my son until he was 18, to educate him, and to give him the tools to be an independent adult. My son is 35, married, and perfectly capable of supporting himself. Financing his adult life is not my responsibility. It is my choice, and I have chosen not to do so anymore. Mr. Weber added firmly, Miss Schmidt, would you consider it normal for a 35-year-old adult to be unable to pay his own rent without the help of a 71-year-old mother? Mrs. Schmidt paused, the wheels turning in her mind. She was clearly reevaluating everything she had been told. Mrs. Richter, she asked carefully, do you manage your own finances completely? I can show you my bank statements, my investments, my tax filings. Everything is current and in order. I live independently, keep my house in order, drive my own car, and maintain healthy social relationships with my neighbors. I take no prescription medications, only vitamins, and the occasional aspirin. I am physically and mentally sound. Mr. Weber chimed in. My client has just completed extensive medical examinations as part of our legal review. She is in perfect mental and physical condition. Mrs. Schmidt closed her folder slowly, a hint of reluctant respect in her expression. Mrs. Richter, based on this conversation and the documentation I have reviewed, I see no indication that you are at risk or in need of intervention. I will close this case. After she left, the tension in the room lifted. For the first time in months, the burden of others' manipulations felt like it had been lifted from my shoulders. Weber and I remained silent for a few minutes, the weight of reality settling between us. Renata, he said finally, this is going to escalate. Max and Lena are spending money they don't have, hiring professionals to try to have you declared incompetent. Does that mean they're desperate? I asked. It means exactly that, he replied. What else can they do? They could file a lawsuit for incompetence. It's expensive and hard to win, but if they find a sympathetic judge and a psychiatrist willing to testify, they could try to have a guardian assigned. The thought made my stomach twist. They could take control of my money. They could try. But we have solid evidence that you are fully competent, Weber continued, and that their motivation is greed, not genuine concern. That afternoon I called Diana to vent. Sister, she said after hearing everything. Do you see how far they're willing to go for money? They are risking family relationships, spending money on lawyers and doctors, tarnishing their own reputation, all just to get access to your bank account again. Her words struck me. Max and Lena had revealed their true nature completely. There was no going back, no possibility of reconciliation. To them, I had never been a mother or a respected mother-in-law. I had always been money on legs. The realization, though painful, was liberating. I no longer had to wonder if I was making the right decision. I no longer had to feel guilty for protecting myself. They had proven that my emotional and physical well-being meant less to them than my money. That evening, Eleanor came with a surprise. She had invited her friends from the garden club to meet me. Renata, she introduced. These are my friends, Cynthia, Maria, Carmen, and Alfreda. We have all been through situations with abusive family members. The evening unfolded with stories of struggle and resilience. Maria had had to set boundaries with a brother who constantly demanded money. Carmen had severed ties with a daughter who only visited when she needed cash. Alfreda had changed her will after discovering her grandchildren saw her as their personal retirement plan. What hurts me the most, I admitted, is not losing the money I gave them, but realizing I never had the love I thought I had. Alfreda, with the calm wisdom of her 80 years, took my hand. Renata, true love cannot be bought or sold. If you had to pay for it, it was never real. Her words sank in, bittersweet but freeing. For the first time, I felt the weight of illusion lift. I had been chasing love in the wrong currency. And now finally, I was free to reclaim my life. Her words were like a balm to my wounded soul. She was right. I hadn't received love. I had purchased attention. I had financed an illusion. You know what I've realized? I said to my new friends, my voice steady now. Being surrounded by people who don't love you is a far lonelier feeling than actually being alone. At least now, when I'm alone, I'm in good company. Laughter filled the room. Glasses clinked as we toasted to hard-earned wisdom. That night, after my friends had gone home, I sat quietly in my garden. The stars seemed to shine brighter than ever. Or maybe it was just that, for the first time, I was seeing them clearly. For the first time in my adult life, I stood completely on my own financially. I owed nothing to anyone. I had no one depending on me, and no obligations tying me down. Instead of frightening me, that realization set my spirit on fire. I could travel whenever I wanted. I could remodel my house. I could buy myself beautiful things. I could support causes that mattered to me. I could invest in my future instead of funding the present of ungrateful people. Freedom tasted like hope. And for the first time in years, I was excited to plan my own future. A month after the psychiatrist's visit, I allowed myself to believe the war was finally over. I had built a peaceful routine. Slow breakfasts with the newspaper, tending to my garden, lunches with Eleanor or one of my new friends, and afternoons filled with activities I'd abandoned long ago. I had started painting again, something that once brought me joy, long before I became Max and Lena's personal financier. But one quiet Thursday morning, as I painted flowers on my new easel, I heard the doorbell. Mr. Weber stood there, his face grim, and my heart tightened. Renata, he said, we need to talk. Max and Lena have filed a formal lawsuit for mental incompetence in family court. The words crashed over me like stones. I had known it was a possibility, but hearing it out loud made it terrifyingly real. Does that mean they could take control of my money? I asked, my voice trembling. If a judge rules that you're unable to manage your affairs, Weber explained softly, yes. He could appoint Max as your legal guardian. That would give him full control over your finances. My hands went cold. Just when I thought I had broken free, they had found another way to tighten their grip that I sank heavily onto the sofa, as if the weight of my entire world had just collapsed on my chest. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had ever felt. My own son, the boy I had raised, the man I had believed in, was trying to have me legally declared incompetent to seize my money. Mr. Weber, I asked, my voice trembling, what evidence could they possibly have? You've seen me. You know I'm completely competent. They've submitted statements from 3 witnesses claiming you've been acting erratically, he replied grimly. They also attached unpaid doctor's bills and records suggesting you've hoarded medication without taking it. I stared at him, stunned. But that's a lie. I don't have unpaid bills. I don't hoard medication. I know, Renata, he said softly, but they've fabricated evidence that looks convincing. They've also included a statement from Dr. Lehman claiming you refused a psychiatric evaluation. They're framing that refusal as proof of mental decline. The manipulation was diabolical. My refusal to undergo an unnecessary evaluation had been twisted into evidence of illness. My instinct to protect myself had been weaponized against me. Who are the 3 witnesses? I asked. Weber flipped through his papers. Lena, of course. A neighbor named Mr. Davis. And someone claiming to be your pharmacist, Mr. Green. Mr. Davis. I knew him well. The neighbor across the street with a permanent scowl and a grudge because my friends occasionally parked near his house. Mr. Green, on the other hand, was my actual pharmacist. I couldn't imagine why he'd testify against me. I need to talk to Mr. Green, I said firmly. Something's not right. That afternoon, Weber and I went to the pharmacy together. Mr. Green greeted me with a nervous smile. Mrs. Richter, he stammered, it's good to see you. How are you, Mr. Green? I asked calmly. I was told you signed a statement saying I behave erratically with my medications. His face flushed crimson. Mrs. Richter, your daughter-in-law came by a few weeks ago, he said hesitantly. She told me she was worried because you'd been acting strangely. She asked about your prescriptions. And what did you tell her? I told her the truth, that you only buy vitamins and occasional aspirin, that you have no regular prescriptions. But she insisted that this was proof you weren't taking proper care of your health. Mr. Weber leaned forward. Mr. Green, did you sign a document? She brought a paper, he admitted. It said I was confirming irregular medication purchases. I thought it was for her insurance, not a lawsuit. My stomach twisted. Even my pharmacist had been manipulated into becoming part of their scheme. Mr. Green, I said, my voice steady but cold. I need a written statement from you explaining exactly what happened and confirming that I have no issues with medication. Of course, Mrs. Richter, he said quickly. I'm so sorry for this misunderstanding. From the pharmacy, we drove straight to Mr. Davis's house. He opened the door, with hostility written all over his face. What do you want? He barked. Mr. Weber spoke evenly. We understand you signed a statement about my client's behavior. You're damn right I did. Davis snapped. That woman is crazy. She's been acting strange for weeks. Can you be specific about what you've observed? Weber asked. She installed cameras everywhere like she's in a war zone. Davis spat. She's got strangers coming and going all the time. And she's out there screaming at her family in the street. I felt anger rise in my chest, not because of what he said, but because I finally saw how easy it was to distort the truth. The cameras weren't paranoia. They were protection. The strangers were my friends. And the yelling? That was me defending my home from Max and Lena's invasions. Mr. Davis, I said clearly. Do you even know why I installed those cameras? No, he said with a dismissive shrug. And I don't care. I installed them to protect myself. I continued, my voice sharp as glass. From my own son and daughter-in-law, who broke into my house without permission and threatened me. For the first time I saw doubt flicker across his face. That's exactly what a crazy person would say, he sneered. There was no way to reason with him. His accusations weren't based on facts, only on shallow observations twisted with malice. That evening, Mr. Weber and I sat together at my dining table. Legal folders spread out before us like the blueprints of a war we hadn't chosen, but would have to fight. Renata, he said, his tone firm but reassuring, we need our own psychiatric evaluation. I have a colleague, Dr. Moore. She's one of the best in assessing mental capacity. She can officially confirm that you are fully competent. A tight knot formed in my stomach. But what if Max and Lena have already bribed the judge? What if none of this matters because they've already decided to declare me incompetent? Renata, he replied, looking me directly in the eyes. The legal system isn't perfect. But it's not completely corrupt either. We have solid evidence. Your financial records, your medical history, the documentation of their harassment. And most importantly, we have the truth on our side. We're going to fight this. The next morning, I went to my appointment with Dr. Moore. She was a woman in her 50s with intelligent, kind eyes and the calm confidence of someone who'd seen far too many families torn apart by greed. Mrs. Richter, she said gently, I'm going to ask you a series of questions and tests to evaluate your mental capacity. Take your time and answer honestly. For 2 hours, she asked about my memory, reasoning abilities, emotional well-being, and understanding of my finances. She gave me cognitive assessments, logical problems, and math exercises. I answered each question with clarity I hadn't realized I still possessed. When the session ended, Dr. Moore smiled warmly. "Mrs. Richter," she said, "your results are well above average for your age. Not only are you mentally competent, your cognitive function is excellent." I exhaled, feeling both relief and sorrow. The professional confirmation gave me strength, but it also underscored the cruelty of what was happening. This lawsuit wasn't just paperwork, it was real. And it was war. That afternoon, Eleanor gathered our garden club for an emergency meeting. As I shared the news about the incompetence lawsuit, their faces filled with outrage. "Renata," Maria said firmly, "we'll testify for you. We've spent weeks with you. Anyone can see you're doing wonderfully." "Better than wonderfully," Cynthia added. "You're sharper than half the 40-year-olds I know." Alfreda, with the calm authority of her 80 years, held my hands in hers. "My dear," she said softly, "what your children are doing isn't new. For generations, greedy children have tried to declare their parents insane to get their money. But unlike many victims, you have something they didn't: documentation, legal support, and friends who can stand by you in court." Her words were like a shield wrapping around my bruised heart. I was not alone. I had an army of strong women who had watched me reclaim my strength. "You know what the saddest part is?" I said, my voice cracking. "Max and Lena are willing to destroy any chance of reconciliation for money. Even if I wanted to forgive everything that's happened so far, there's no coming back from this." "Maybe that's for the best," Cynthia replied gently. "At least now you know exactly who they are, and you can act accordingly." That night, for the first time since this nightmare began, I allowed myself to truly cry. Not out of weakness, but out of grief. I said goodbye to the son I thought I had. I mourned the dream of a loving family. I let go of the illusion that unconditional love had been mutual. But when the tears finally dried, something unbreakable took root inside me, an iron determination. I would not let them take my money. I would not let them strip me of my dignity or my freedom. The war had officially begun. 3 weeks later, the trial day arrived. I woke early, dressed carefully in my best black suit, and stared at myself in the mirror. My reflection stared back with a fire I hadn't seen in years. Today, it wasn't just my mental competence on trial. It was my dignity as a human being, my right to live free from abuse, my worth beyond a bank account. And I was ready to fight. Mr. Weber arrived at 7 a.m., the early light spilling through the office windows, and we went over our strategy one last time. "Renata," he said, leaning over the table, "remember, the burden of proof is on them. They have to prove you are incompetent. We just have to show you are not." "What if the judge is already biased?" I asked, my voice tight with anxiety. "Judge Miller has a reputation for fairness," Mr. Weber replied confidently. "I researched his past cases. He doesn't automatically favor families. He's dedicated to protecting the rights of the elderly." By 9 a.m., we arrived at the courthouse. In the hallway, I saw Max in a brand new suit, probably bought for the occasion, and Lena dressed in black as if attending a funeral. Perhaps it was the funeral of our family relationship. Max avoided my gaze entirely, but Lena held mine with a coldness that left no doubt in my mind. This was business, not family. Their lawyer was older, impeccably groomed, with the calm confidence of someone who had won similar cases many times before. When he began his opening statement, the strategy was clear. Portray me as a frail, confused woman, manipulated by outsiders to alienate herself from her loving family. "Your Honor," he said, voice solemn, "Mrs. Renata Richter has shown a clear mental decline in recent months. She has abruptly cut off all financial support for her family, installed unnecessary security systems due to paranoia, and isolated herself from loved ones under the influence of neighbors and lawyers who are clearly exploiting her vulnerable state." Every carefully chosen word twisted my self-empowerment into dementia, my assertiveness into paranoia. Then came the witnesses. Lena went first. Her performance could have won an Oscar. Tears streamed down her face as she spoke of my alleged decline, my hostility, my supposed paranoia. Your Honor, she quivered. Renata has always been like a second mother to me. Seeing her mental decline has been devastating. We just want to help her get the care she needs. Lies cloaked in tears. Mr. Weber's cross-examination began. Mrs. Schuster, he said calmly, can you tell the court when the last time was that you called my client without asking for money? Lena stammered. Well, we always talked about many things. Can you give me a specific date? I don't remember exact dates. Is it true that you and your husband got married without inviting my client? It was a very small ceremony. Is it true that when my client asked about the wedding, you told her she was not invited because only special people were invited? Lena's face flushed red. She faltered. There was no answer that could make that excuse credible. Then Max took the stand. Watching him swear to tell the truth while preparing to lie about my mental health was one of the most painful moments of my life. This was the boy I had raised alone, the one I had devoted my entire life to. My mom has always been generous, he testified. But lately, she has become erratic and irrational. We believe she is being manipulated by people who are taking advantage of her. Mr. Weber's cross-examination began. Mr. Richter, how much money have you received from your mother? In the last 3 years. I don't know the exact amount. $33, $400 sound about right? Maybe she's always been generous. And how many times have you visited your mother without asking for money? The silence was deafening. Is it true that you and your wife broke into my client's house without permission and checked her private documents? We were worried about her, Max mumbled. Is it true you brought a lawyer to pressure her into signing a power of attorney? We wanted to help her manage her finances. And at 35 years old, do you need your 71-year-old mother to pay your rent? Max could not answer with dignity. Then Mr. Davis testified about my supposed erratic behaviors. Under Mr. Weber's questioning, the cracks in his story were exposed. He had never spoken to me directly. His testimony was based entirely on superficial observations and rumor. Judge Miller's gaze swept over the courtroom before resting on me. Her decision to stop financial support, although emotionally difficult for her family, is entirely within her legal and moral rights. I find that there is no evidence of incompetence. Relief flooded through me like sunlight, breaking through storm clouds. I felt my shoulders relax for the first time in months. The courtroom, once a place of fear and anxiety, now seemed almost serene. Turning toward Max and Lena, I saw disbelief etched into their faces. Max's jaw tightened, and Lena's tears were now meaningless, hollow theatrics that could no longer touch me. They had tried to frame my clarity and independence as madness, but the truth was undeniable. Judge Miller continued, his voice firm. The court recognizes the thorough evaluations presented by Dr. Moore, the testimony of witnesses familiar with Mrs. Richter's daily competence, and the documentation of her financial independence. This case is dismissed in its entirety. Mrs. Richter retains full control of her finances, her home and her life. A gasp rippled through the gallery. I felt a strange mix of vindication and sorrow. This victory confirmed my strength, but it also confirmed a painful truth. The family I had poured my heart and money into for decades valued neither my love nor my presence. They only valued what I could provide. Mr. Weber gave me a subtle, reassuring nod. You did it, he whispered. You stood your ground, and justice prevailed. I stepped out of the witness stand, my heart pounding, not with fear, but with liberation. Outside the courtroom, Eleanor and my friends were waiting, smiles bright and proud. Tears filled my eyes as they embraced me. For the first time in years, I felt fully seen. Not as a bank account or a caretaker, but as a person deserving of respect, love, and autonomy. As we walked down the courthouse steps, I glanced back once, not with anger, but with clarity. Max and Lena would continue their lives, but I would continue mine, free, empowered, and finally living on my own terms. That day marked not just a legal victory, but the reclaiming of my life. I had been tested, manipulated, and betrayed, Yet I emerged stronger. And for the first time, I allowed myself to plan a future that belonged entirely to me. One filled with love, friendship, and the quiet joy of independence. Furthermore, the judge continued, the evidence suggests that this lawsuit is motivated by financial interest rather than genuine concern for Mrs. Richter's well-being. The court completely denies the request for guardianship. I had won, not just the lawsuit, but my freedom, my dignity, my right to live without the abuse of those who claim to love me. Outside the courthouse, I saw Max and Lena in a heated discussion with their lawyer. Lena's glare burned with pure hatred as she walked away. Max looked at me once, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw regret, but it was already too late. That evening, Ella Lehner hosted a celebration at my home with all our friends. We raised our glasses in a toast, to justice, to freedom, to the sisterhood of strong women who lift each other up. Renedy, Alfreda said, her voice warm with wisdom. Today, you didn't just win a trial. You won back your life. She was right. For the first time in years, the future was mine. I could travel. I could love. I could create. I could live fully, without fear, guilt, or manipulation. 3 months later, I sold my house and moved into a beautiful apartment near the city center. I donated half of my money to organizations protecting the elderly from family abuse, and with the other half, I began living the life I had always dreamed of. I traveled through Europe, took art classes, and joined volunteer groups. I never heard from Max or Lena again. I later learned they had moved to a smaller apartment, and Lena had finally found a job. Perhaps adversity would teach them what my generosity never could. The value of honest work, independence, and respect. Some nights, as I gaze at the stars from my balcony, I think about the woman I was a year ago. Fearful, manipulated, believing I had to buy love. That woman is gone. In her place stands someone who has learned a fundamental truth. True love has no price, and freedom is priceless. My name is Renedy. I am 72 years old, and I have finally learned that the most important person I must love and protect is myself. If you enjoyed my story, you can support me by making a donation so I can continue sharing more life stories. I would also love to hear your thoughts. What would you do in my place? Share your opinions in the comments and tell me where you first heard this story. For more life-changing stories like this, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Many more stories are waiting to inspire you. With heartfelt greetings, M.